What is the most difficult aspect of your martial art? Welcome back to the Good Martials Universal Podcast. I'm Dan Bernardo, Keith Mosier, Bo Davis.
I like to think of it as like subjects and units. When I was watching Rick teach the other day, it's kind of what popped into my head because he's covering like a subject and he'll go over different units and kind of build on it and make it more complex. And of course there's many layers to that and there's more than one subject being taught at once, but the way he just kind of went from one to the other, to the other, to the other, and then watching the kid put it into the sparring after was really something.
That's good teaching structure. I mean, that's where a non-randomized linear teaching progression, which is good. I mean, that's the way it should be. I tend to do things like, rather than think linearly like that, I will focus on a topic. Let's say Bong Sao. And then over the course of the week, I will put them in many different scenarios that deal with that one thing. And sometimes I won't even, in the past, before I did the newsletter, I wouldn't even tell them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember what once a discussion with Iron Mike, it was like, well, when are we going to work so-and-so? Mike, we've been doing it all week. What do you mean? Remember when we did this drill? What was the third move? Remember when we did this drill? What was the first move? Remember when we did this drill? What was the last move? And you could just see his face go, whoa. And so it's just a different approach. There are different methodologies for teaching. Certainly a linear progression is a good one. But yeah, it all comes down to teaching, providing structure. No different than the way as humans we learn language. We pick up a few common things first, mama, papa.
And we speak it first before we learn to read and write it.
Right.
That's the most natural way.
And we make stuff up at first.
Mm-hmm.
And through trial and error, figure out whether it works. But eventually we have to acquire the structure.
Yeah, it's like we develop a working knowledge or a working ability, and then we tighten it up, right? As we get older, like we can talk about things, we can have a conversation when you're 5 years old, but you can't have a deep philosophical discussion about quantum mechanics, about blah 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 blah. So like as you get older, you start to tighten up what your language. You learn new words. You learn how to write different words in different ways. You learn how to write iambic pentameter. You learn how to cite sources. You learn how to do all these other things. You learn what a logical fallacy is. You learn So I think
it's very similar.
It's very similar to
trying to
martial.
achieve that fluency.
When
Not just achieve fluency, but achieve mastery over your fluency. Because there's a difference between just being fluent in a language. Because you can be fluent. For instance, you can be fluent in English, but if you talk to a master mathematician, you won't understand a word they're saying.
No clue.
They're speaking English, they're talking to you, but you don't understand it because there's a certain level of mastery on that specific piece of English that you just don't have. And the same thing goes with people who are lawyers. They have a certain mastery of the language that other people don't have. Doctors. And I think martial artists as well. We just have...
we have our own argot for one thing.
Yeah.
And that's, first they've got to learn that. So I broke my ankle and the mortise of the talus.
Right.
What?
Right, exactly.
I had to look them up. Oh, okay, the talus is a bone. Mortise is a gap.
You said
To a
mortise, I
doctor.
thought death.
Yeah. first thing I thought is cement.
Cement.
Between mortar.
Oh,
Like
hell.
between bricks. That was the first thing I thought of. But
Maybe
to a
mortar goes
doctor,
into gaps.
right, yeah. But to a doctor, a mortise is a gap.
Yeah.
So any given specialty, martial arts has its own language, its own argot that the student has to acquire. Not that it couldn't be taught without it.
It can,
It can be.
but there's a certain level of mastery of that language that they won't have.
Yeah.
They won't be able to carry on the same conversations with other people who have that level of mastery. They might be able to fight just fine, they might be able to do a technique just fine, but maybe not. Maybe they'll miss something. Maybe they'll have a misunderstanding of something, right? For instance, I had a discussion with a gentleman not too long ago, maybe about a year ago. I posted a picture of Pongi's book, him doing a knee on somebody, a picture of Fiore's book, him doing a knee on somebody, a picture from a German manual, dude doing a knee on somebody. And the guy, just by looking at the pictures, said, that doesn't look like a knee, that looks like an entry into a sweep or a takedown. And I went, well, this is what the text actually says. And yes, it does say it's a knee. So like, there's a certain level of understanding that we can have when we are training and studying this language that other people just won't have. And I think that's why, and that might be another difficult aspect of martial arts is getting people, because there is sort of a gap between having that kind of 5-year-old to 7-year-old language that they can do out there, and and everybody can, for instance, I saw a video today, some guy was talking about a fake, he was doing saber, he did a fake cut into a reverse cut, and it was a fake. I don't know, it might have been.
Sounds like exactly.
But that is totally and no disrespect, that is totally a 7 to 10-year-old kind of
Well, also, the
language,
the
right?
approach and breakdown of it has to be for the YouTube though, because it has to be easily digestible.
Whether that is true or not, but this is whether it's for YouTube or what. And I'm not saying that that's his level of understanding. What I'm saying is that awareness of the art in just that one single thing. That is a more immature level of
upon. I mean, that is.
Well,
It's a beginner technique.
It is
a learner technique.
It is a person going. When was the first time you learned what a big word was? Like you had, like I remember being a kid and going, what do you call? Axolotl was a big, cool word, right? But then just last year I realized that that's not actually how it's pronounced, right? So like we pronounce it wrong, right? It's ajolote or something like that. That's how it's actually pronounced, right? So like even that big long word, me when I was 10 years old, I thought that was a cool word, and then now I realize, no, that's not how that's pronounced, right? That's kind of the same way. Like, this is a really cool word, and then later you realize, it's just a part of a big, huge thing that I need to be able to play with, and you know what I mean?
I would disagree that the language is important, but I would disagree that it's the hardest part, that it's hard to teach compared to the things we've previously discussed.
Yeah,
such
I
as
think footwork
because
in relaxation or footwork.
Because when the person walks in the door, you know you're going to have to teach them this stuff. And they know they're going to have to learn that stuff. And most of them are open to it. Whether, even if it's totally English argot. I walked into a boxing gym. This, what is a jab? Well, a jab is my lead.
So
a
let me-
cross is my rear.
I think maybe it went in a different direction than I wanted it to. I'm not talking about language as in the actual speaking words. I'm talking about martial arts.
The language of action.
Yeah, it is an actual conversation that you have with somebody.
And that goes, yes, that is an actual, the combat is an actual conversation.
And they have to.
That's
the analogy I'm
right.
making.
That's dynamic, and that has to be internalized, and it has to come naturally, just as none of us knew exactly what we were going to say in this podcast.
Yeah.
But we were able to say it without thinking about every word. We didn't have to do that. We could just, you could just,
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, I had to think pretty hard.
But was like, I don't know how to speak English.
Yeah.
It's really tough. It's really tough.
It gets
Then there's
me.
Korean, and in the subject and the verb and everything is backwards, and it's
But
like
I mean-
Yoda speak.
yeah.
I just learned
That
to
particular language, yes. The language of combat itself.
Yeah.
But that, again, that's more learned than taught. All we can
again,
do
like
is
everything
provide
is, right?
But what we do as teachers is we provide guidance on sentence structure and grammar and stuff like that.
tools for the toolbox,
Right.
blueprints for
But the
blueprints.
hardest tools are the vague tools, the difficult to see tools. I would say, I start off with relaxation because it is extremely important in Kung Fu, whether you call it Song or whatever. Any martial art, I've had arguments about, external, internal. Well, the reality is, Dan and I have talked about this before, the reality is they are always both. You cannot separate them. How do you teach the internal? That is very difficult. That is difficult to do.
Don't get me started on the history of those two terms and how
Right.
internal doesn't actually mean
Right.
what you think it
Right.
means.
Right. But it is.
That would be a different podcast. Yeah.
It's hard to do because it is something that is difficult to see. It must be felt, and not everybody can feel it. You can touch hands with somebody, and Wing Chun will often touch hands with somebody, and I will say, "Can you feel that?" No. Okay, I got to work around with this. I got to do something more with this person. Usually, that you can get them to feel what you're talking about. Sometimes you can't. It's just really hard. So
Yeah.
those invisible things that are absolutely required. Yeah, those are the hard things to.
Like a space.
Yeah, a space is, yeah.
Just gotta have that every now
You,
and then.
you gotta have
Or
a
a,
space.
or a, or
You know,
a-
music wouldn't be
or a-
note.
music
There you
wouldn't
go, something.
be music would not be music without space.
A stutter, anything.
That is why there are actual notations for silence.
There's a whole song that is nothing but silent notation.
Never heard it.
It's my son tells me all about it, of course, but it's like 7 minutes long.
There's,
Just sit there for 7 minutes.
It's really cool. It's kind of an experimental piece, but it's
probably a John Cage kind of thing. He experimented with all kinds of really wacky stuff.
It might have
Like
been. Might have been.
throwing a grand piano out of a 7-story window, and the resulting sound was the music. When did the music start?
Right. Up there?
Yeah.
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 So there's silence and applause and anticipation for the cacophony.
Yeah.
Another one of his compositions was like a 5-story building and a quartet and a mariachi band and different things.
He dropped the mariachi band off the building.
different bands on different floors
Oh, okay.
playing certain pieces of music starting at a specific time, and the audience had to get into an elevator and had a prescription of time lengths and floors. So they had to go to a floor and wait a certain period of time and go. And what John was saying was, it was not just the music you heard when the doors opened, but the stuff you heard as you traveled between the floors.
Yeah.
And some of that was silence and some of it, no, but
Yeah, 100%.
deviated off. Of the
Very, very big
topic.
deviation. That's okay.
It would have been funny if he threw a mariachi band off. I thought you were gonna say for a second, he just threw everything off. I was like, oh.
No, he was an experimentalist, but he wasn't stupid.
Yeah, not at all. All right, what do you think is the most difficult part of your martial art to teach?
Getting to class on time.
That's a good one.
That is hard. That is hard. Please make sure that you like and subscribe and
Comment. Did I say comment? Comment.
Comment.
are we sure we want them to comment?
Yes,
All right, fine.
Hit the notification bell so you know when we upload next.
yeah.
Peace out.
Peace.